heat.
Yeah, you think it's that simple.
Basically.
Yeah.
And you know what I've been saying that although earlier in the past I've been depending on the but in the new multimedia and social media age, go back to one page and
Hello, Eleanor.
I could do it in 30 days.
Please,
possible.
if you have some influence.
What I do is I just give just very short
Because he had,
biographies, and you actually introduce the session, and if you're sort of moderating. So I'm now going to introduce our next session, which is called Oneness in Diversity. I have the moderator, Professor Eleanor Nesbitt, here with me. I'm sure many of you know Eleanor's work. She's published extensively on the interface between religions and the religious socialization of young people. Christian, Sikh and Hindu communities are the focus of her studies. And her books include Sikhism, a very short introduction, and one called Open to New Light, Quakers and Other Faiths, and one called Sikh, 2 Century of Western Women's Art and Writing. And Eleanor is Professor Emeritus of Religions and Education at the University of Warwick. Now, I believe that Gopinder Kaur Sagoo can't be with us today, as sadly she has COVID, but I gather that the other speakers are going to cover her contribution. And just to mention that Gopinder combines a background in humanities and social sciences with her lifelong learning as a Sikh. And in her recent doctoral thesis, she looked at the making and shaping of a new British nursery infused with a Sikh multi-faith value-centred ethos. And I'm sure we all join together in wishing Gopinder a very quick recovery. Harinder Singh, would you like to join us on stage, please, Helen? Is a member of the UK Sikh diaspora based in Leicester, known for his creative pursuits in children's books, plays, animations, and curating the Sikh Arts and Films Festival. And he is the person who conceptualised and compiled the celebrated book, Jewels from Sikh Wisdom, which I believe you will have seen outside, which Gopinder also worked on, which features the artwork of the renowned Singh twins. And Moin, I haven't seen Moin today. Is Moin here? Has anybody seen Moin? Yeah, he was here. Oh, well, I'm going to introduce him in his absence then. When he appears, you will know who he is. He is here. He's a writer of non-fiction and fiction, and his latest novel, The Lost Fragrance of Infinity, was inspired by the all-inclusive philosophy of Sufism. It featured in the Times of India's top 10 reads of 2021, and in his latest non-fiction book, Mere Travels in the Footsteps of Plotinus, the 3rd century philosopher, marrying personal experiences, poetry and philosophy, and here is Moin. Obviously too shy to be introduced. And Advait Kottary was an engine designer before becoming a writer and an actor. Where is Advait?
Oh, I'm right here.
Oh, sorry.
No, really.
Hi. He's a writer and an actor who's been in the Bollywood musical Jaane Jigar and the film Beecham House. His first novel, Siddhartha, stems from his own quest to understand the self and his encounter with the Buddha's teaching. So with this wonderful lineup, I'm going to give you the stage. Eleanor, you're in charge, and looking forward to hearing about this wonderful book.
So welcome everybody to this session of Oneness in Diversity, and my thanks to the Khushwant Singh Literary Festival and to Khushwant Singh himself, whom I had the honour of meeting in the 1980s. And thank you to all the team who have been so helpful to us. The format of this session, I think you'll have realised, is that the authors will in turn present their particular book. And then, following that, there will be a conversation between the authors, and that will then lead into questions and answers, I hope. And so while the speakers are speaking, I hope you'll be making a note of your questions, because you'll have to remember them for the end when you've heard all three. And it would be, yes, so here you can see, let me just see, Gopinder. This is Gopinder, who was actually the person who wrote the majority of the text in this very beautiful book, which Harinder is going to speak about. And yes, the Singh twins are responsible for all of the wonderful artwork and their commentary on it, and they sadly can't be with us either, but it's a richly illustrated book, and their presence will be with us throughout, through their work. So what will happen is that Harinder Singh will speak, and then Gopinder has kindly sent us her words, which I will voice, and then we will proceed to the next presenter, who will be Advait, and then after that, Moin. So without more ado, Harinder Singh, who lives in Leicester and established Sikh Arts and Animations Company, and has been involved in interfaith dialogue for a long time, and had the idea for this book.
Thank you. Thank you, Rachel. Thank you, Eleanor. And thank you, Nilofer and Rahul, for inviting us to this year's Khushwant Singh Literary Festival at SOAS to reflect upon the theme of healing the world through peace building and oneness of humanity. I would first of all like to greet all of you with a traditional Sikh greeting of Sat Sri Akal. This greeting reminds us that the only permanent truth is the divine energy we call God, as we are all temporary travelers to this planet. We are all on a leasehold, some on 100, 50, 25, or some on no lease whatsoever. So we have to be mindful of that. When we say Sat Sri Akal, we should be reminding ourselves and the others that we should speak the truth, because God is truth, and truth is God. Now let me talk about this book, Jewels from Sikh Wisdom, a journey of discovery. Yes, I have been credited for conceptualizing and compiling this book, but the symphony was being conducted by the divine. I was a conductor, of course, like on a private bus, ensuring the right people were on board and ringing the bell from time to move the project forward. For me personally, it has been a journey of discovery of the gems and jewels that are contained in the Sikh scriptures, because it is a book of oneness of humanity. The fifth Guru, Guru Arjan Sahib, in his immense wisdom and with the help of Bhai Gurdas, compiled the first edition of Guru Granth Sahib and called it Adi Granth, or the Timeless Granth, and also included 26 Muslim, Sufi, saints, and Hindu Bhagat hymns. Only 6 of our Gurus' hymns are in this beautiful compilation. I've been a lover of Guru Nanak, and for a long time I had wanted to compile a spectacular book that would have the divine hymns on one page and artwork on the other that would complement the divine message. Now, one day when I was scrolling through Google Guru to try and find some good artists that would do justice to the Gurbani, I came across the Twin Singh's Sikh series. It was a light bulb moment, Damag ki batti jal gayi. And I thought I must invite these artists to create the artwork for this book. And so started my journey. Many miracles kept happening. I won't go into that, we don't have time. But suffice it to say that when one is on a spiritual path, then spiritual algorithms kick in. The twins came on board and gave us more than 2 years of selfless seva. And then Bhai Sahib Mohinder Singh Ji of Nishkam Seva Jatha became our guide and patron, and he introduced me to the beautiful spiritual soul, Gopinder Kaur, who unfortunately hasn't been able to come here today, who has done a remarkable job in the creative translations, which we call transcreations in this book, creatively translating the wisdom of the Bani. Okay, next slide. In the theme of oneness, it is the theme of oneness that inspired me to conceptualize this book. This book opens with a beautiful artwork by the twins of Ik. In Punjabi, it means oneness. Ek pita, ekas ke hum barak. We are children of one father. Bhagat Kabir in Guru Granth Sahib says, Ek noor te sab jag upja, kaun bhale kaun mande. If from this divine light the entire universe welled up, then who can we truly judge as being good or bad? The main obstacle to oneness and peace is a mind overpowered by 5 vices, especially of ego. Desire then turns to blind lust. Anger becomes vengeance. Need becomes greed. Loving bonds become possessiveness, and self-respect becomes arrogant pride. The impact of these vices globally, the impact of these vices globally over history is a key theme in the art of the Singh twins. They are contrasted in the book by meditations on wisdom and virtue. Journeying through Japji Sahib, Guru Nanak's seminal teaching, we view the entire planet as a dharamsal, a stopover for a traveling soul, and a place to practice dharam, enlightened and responsible living. We learn it is held in balance, not by a mythical bull, but by dharam, the divine order and harmony. And dharam is a child of Daya. Dharam is very important, and this is the whole thing is that compassion is very, very important for contentment in a world that is fueling wars, injustices, and poverty through vengeance, exploitation, and greed. Now, Guru Nanak traveled over 28,000 miles to conquer, not to conquer land or to make money, but to conquer the hearts and minds of people with his message of oneness, of compassion, of truth, contentment, humility, and love. Guru Nanak says in one of his hymns, Pardesh Chag Saude ko aaya. Having traveled across new lands, I've come here to do business. Now, what business is Guru Nanak talking about? Well, then he says, for I'd heard of an incomparable merchandise which brings true profit. I arrive here with a precious bundle, the wealth of spiritual virtue, which is my business capital. Beholding this fascinating jewel, my mind is in awe. Absolutely wonderful hymn that he's composed many, many times in different parts of the world. Let me close now with Ik Onkar, Guru Nanak's essential symbol of oneness, reimagined by the Singh twins as a window to the universe. The numeral Ik, or one, shows the one light in all beings. The curves show the divine energy existing. Zarre zarre de which, Guru Nanak said, zarre zarre de which, in every speck of creation, from the earth, above ground and underground, to the sky and beyond, as the tree of life points towards infinity. This symbol underpins Guru Nanak's message of universal peace and love. Thank you.
So, in this session on oneness, I have the job now of being two, of being myself and also being Gopinder Kaur. And Gopinder thanks everybody for the chance to return to the theme of oneness that opens the Jules book, expressed by the twins' artistic expression, reimagining the numeral ik, or one, and the arcs of the Onkar and its graceful transcendent canopy. So it's not just the visual image, but also the sound and the energy. Today, she says, I would like to reflect on the dynamic, transformative and healing nature of Ik Omkar as the seed of all Sikh teaching. Ik is the one eternal awareness existing behind and before all forms, a sublime intelligence and sovereign consciousness, the mind of God, imagined as Jyot, or unseen light. And next comes Om, the unstruck sound and eternal word and song that bring forms into being, a resident presence that is known as Nam, the divine name. Finally, Kar evokes the realms of creation across all time and space, and a circle of grace that sustains an awe-inspiring web of existence. So Gopinder says, through these syllables, I hear other patterns of three: Ik Onkar, light, sound, form; mind, word, action; radiance, resonance, regeneration. It's an invitation to awaken, express, and manifest our truest spiritual self. But this oneness is not only the root of existence, but the root of our being that exists beyond fear, beyond hate, nirbhau, nirvair, twin qualities from which all peace and healing emerge. So our other theme, the healing, as well as the oneness. Visions of oneness had, of course, long existed in Indic and Abrahamic traditions. Travelling vast distances, often on foot, and meeting diverse people at their level, Guru Nanak offered it as a poignant social calling for us to transform how we relate and collaborate, conscious of our finite stay here in the infinite context of existence. So this slide shows a compass and sandals. Living himself as Europe was moving into its age of discovery, the Renaissance and Reformation. Guru Nanak was roughly a contemporary of Martin Luther. Guru Nanak founded a path that did not separate the religious from the worldly, nor polarize contrasting visions of oneness. Some of my favourite images from the book include a golden compass and Guru Nanak's simple wooden sandals, over the lines of a map that reflect ideas of alignment, direction, intention, and purpose in Sikh teaching. Hence Guru Nanak's first question: how can one walk the way of truth? To be at one with the oneness is to be true to the light within us, instead of living with a veneer of virtue over our shallowness or hypocrisy as counterfeit versions of our truest selves. And this picture shows watering the flower. Gopinder finishes with this image of a female figure watering a flower. It echoes the scriptural portrayal of the human soul as female and reminds us of Guru Nanak's famous dialogues with the Sidh, when he met a circle of formidable ascetics in the remote mountain reaches far away from the everyday world. In a famous response to their questions, he observed, "My Guru is wisdom's eternal resonance, and inner awareness is the disciple, transformed through its vibration, Shabad Guru." So this image of nurture by the Singh twins reminds us that the word Sikh evokes a process of continuous inward learning, striving and cultivation. It points back to the power of Ik Onkar to stimulate personal change by helping us transcend our preoccupation with ahankar, our sense of self-identity that risks isolating us in ignorance and arrogance. This shift of view brings a shift of sentiment towards living with profound gratitude, awe, humility, reverence, and responsibility, the jewel-like qualities that bring humans true beauty, and the tools that empower us to discover our true strength. As Jules from Sikh Wisdom tries to convey, these qualities, the real treasures we are here to trade, to bring healing and richness to the world, and depart with intangible riches. And on that note, it's my pleasure to introduce Advait Kottary and to invite him to share with us an evocation of Siddhartha, the boy who became the Buddha. You've already heard that Advait is passionate about cars and engineering, and he co-conceptualized the award-winning Indian television show, Amolki, and so on. I won't take up any more of his valuable time so that he can share with us Siddhartha, the boy who became the Buddha. Thank you.
Thank you, Eleanor. That was very kind. Thank you to everyone here and everyone watching live as well. I'd just like to preface everything I'm about to say today by saying that I'm not a historian or a scholar. I'm just a man who had certain questions from life, and I was fascinated with another man's quest to find answers to them 2,500 years ago. I feel like the story of Siddhartha is something that we all know, at least at an academic level. The boy who grew up to be a monarch, well, that was his destiny. It was supposed to be. A prince with an enormous weight on his shoulders from the second he was born. Until the time, of course, he saw 4 sights all around human suffering. And that began his quest to understand the nature of the human condition. Why do we suffer? How do we suffer? There are just a few nuances that I wanted to bring to light in the life of Siddhartha that help us draw parallels with his state of mind into his quest for human suffering, rather, and where we are today. The first being, of course, that when he was born, his father, King Shuddhodhan, had been praying for an heir for years and years. And he was told by an ascetic, a wandering ascetic, that your son will be a great leader. Now, as is the esoteric nature of divine decrees, he said leader, he didn't say king. And that gave King Shuddhodhan sleepless nights. He went to great extent to make sure that Siddhartha wouldn't be sensitized towards human suffering by making sure that Siddhartha wouldn't even see human suffering. Everyone in the royal household was forced to color their hair black. Not a grey hair in sight, not a limp, nothing. And so, yes, Siddhartha did see suffering in an old man. But I think the most formative experience, the sight that he saw, was when he visited the city of Sukhibasti. Now, Sukhibasti was a city that was built on the outskirts of Kapilavastu, where all the injured, the maimed, the differently abled, everyone was sent there, everyone who was less than perfect was sent there to live out the rest of their days. It was called Kali Basti by the people who lived there, because all the walls were black. Not because they were painted, but because they were black from the smoke, from the continuous funeral pyres that burnt inside. And that was the moment that Siddhartha became aware that not only are we capable of incredible acts of love towards one another as human beings, but also the most horrific acts of violence. Because in that city, of course, there were people who were sick, but above all, the largest population of that city were the people who had been injured in war that he and his father had fought. It seems quite ironic that a man who has not seen much suffering in his life dive so deep and questions himself and the universe in such a way. And fast forward to today, where every single screen we look at has a new story of human atrocity, of violence that we inflict one upon the other. And we're almost desensitized towards it. I read about something called compassion fatigue in 2020 when we were going through one of the series of lockdowns, where we are exposed to pain and suffering so much that we almost run out of compassion. And I thought that's fascinating. Is it possible for us to be exposed to so much suffering that we become immune to it? That it has no effect on us, that we lose the ability to feel that which perhaps defines us as human beings. It's almost dystopian in a sort of Clockwork Orange kind of way. The second anecdote that I want to share from Siddharth's life was the birth of his son, Rahul. And bear in mind, this was 2,500 years ago. There were no painkillers, only prayers. His wife, Yashodhara, lay down on the bed, having just given birth to his son, Rahul. And as Rahul was taking his first breath of air, the palace around him was erupting in joy, and Siddharth looked at his son. Yashodhara was semi-conscious at that time. And the first words that he said to his son were, "But you too will die." Can you imagine? You too will die. This was a man who was torn by the dualities that we have in life. Dualities that still exist today, that perhaps are very fundamental to the very nature of life itself. And so that began his quest, where he tortured himself. To understand human suffering, he inflicted so much of it upon himself that perhaps at that point in time, there was no one in existence who knew more about it than Siddharth himself. He was on the precipice of death several times through his quest. And every time he sat in what he called dhyan, he arrived at the same fundamental truth. A singularity he called shunyata, a state in which he could see and perceive everything and yet nothing, where there was happiness and there was sadness, there was light and there was dark, there was and there wasn't, there simply was shunyata. And it was this experience with shunyata and his endeavors to go past it, to go deeper into this meditative state, that made him realize that this is the very same energy that is flowing through each of us, through every living cell. And that is why everyone, saints, sinners, monks, monarchs, everyone was drawn to Siddharth, to this man who had discovered something, who had seen something that perhaps none of us had before. Suffering is inevitable. Human suffering is inevitable. But yet, as part of this human experience, do you find it fascinating that two children from two different parts of the world, from different points in time even, if they're happy, they will smile. And if they're sad, they will cry. There is a commonality in the energy that they get, that they draw their life from. Savage Garden said it beautifully. I can't say it better myself. I mean, animals and children tell the truth, they never lie. Which one is more human? There's a thought. Now you decide. And I just want to conclude by saying that I read somewhere that eyes are the biggest deceivers, because they tend to show you, they make you feel like you're looking outwards at the world outside, but what they are actually doing, they are being mirrors and reflecting the world that is inside. So is the world today a reflection of who we are as individuals? A bit torn, a bit fragmented, a bit hurt, and healing as well. The last teaching of Siddharth, the last words that he ever spoke were, Apo Deepo Bhava, which means be your own light. It was that teaching that he shared with everyone because that was his answer. He knew that at the end of the day, every living being wakes up, is born and wakes up with a sense of knowing their place and knowing the sense of right, wrong, and where they are belonging in the universe. Maybe if we look a little bit deeper within ourselves, we will find that light. And the moment we find it, the moment we recognize that in someone else as well, perhaps our first step towards healing the world and ourselves is to truly relish it, welcome others into it, and love it. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you so much. It's a really rich session, isn't it? Now, I'm going to hand over to Moin, who is a writer of non-fiction and fiction, and was influenced initially by his Sufi grandfather. I won't take any more of his time either, but you're in for a fascinating trip through a number of countries of the world, in pursuit of the one and following Plotinus. Welcome.
Thank you, Eleanor. Thank you, Nilofer and Rahul, for inviting me. And thank you all for taking the time out on Saturday to be here. It's such a wonderful session because it will be thought-provoking for all of us. I wanted to talk to you a little bit about my upcoming book, which is due for release in Jan. And it's titled Travels with Plotinus, A Journey in Search of Unity. Plotinus was this incredible philosopher who lived in the 3rd century in Rome. He was born in Egypt to a Greek family and taught in Rome for 26 years. He spent many years in a quest to try and reach India, which people don't really know. And he tried his level best to get to India with the sole objective of trying to study the Upanishads. He never made it. And after 1,780 years, I decided to travel in his footsteps and understand his philosophy and his poetry about oneness and unity. And so I've got a couple of slides to show you about my travels, but also a little bit about who Plotinus was and what his philosophy was. Plotinus's deep lament was never having reached India and got his hands on the Upanishads. But nevertheless, in Rome, he wrote this astounding book called the Enneads, and he wrote it in Greek. His poetry, when I read it in English, translated in English. It was absolutely staggering. The kind of words, the kind of illuminated thinking. One of the verses is astounding, which I'll share with you. My soul is in labor in her eager longing for the one, but we must sing another charm to her. Intellect in love, when it goes out of its mind, drunk with nectar, simplified into happiness, the soul in her natural state is in love with God and wants to be united with it. It is like the noble love of a girl for her noble father. And this is probably the first time that a philosopher gives a gender to a soul, and it's not male, it's female. And I think it stems from this tenderness of the soul. He goes on to basically say there is one creator that creates intellect and that creates soul. And basically, he slams intellect by being the greatest deceiver of good thought, because the one is good. And he lays the blame of all our suffering at the doorstep of intellect. Greed, jealousy, ambition, and all of that. But when I was trying to understand Plotinus, which is very, very easy, and at the same time you can make it as complicated as you want, the one thing that did come through was his passion to read the Upanishads. And as I was trying to read the Upanishads to try and fulfill his dream, I mean, it's magnificent, the Upanishads. But one of the verses that struck me was astounding. Thy neighbor is in truth thy very self, and what separates you from him is mere illusion. And one can see the similarity between the Enneads and the Upanishads. So if you look at this map, Plotinus basically started off from Rome, and where you see the circles, he kind of reached as far as Byzantium, went further down, which is modern-day Istanbul, went further down towards modern-day Iraq, which is Ctesiphon. And the Roman army that he had embedded himself in, which was waging war on Persia, and he thought he would kind of smuggle his way into India after that, got defeated at Ctesiphon in Iraq, and he had to find his way back to Rome. I had the good fortune to travel in his footsteps. Once again, as far as Bursa, which is in modern-day Turkey, but then I cheated and took a flight to India. And there I, of course, went to this fantastic shrine in Ajmer, where Plotinus's words rang true when I encountered this deg, which is a Sufi cauldron where they make this fabulous mix of raisins, rice, and almonds, and they serve it to everyone without discrimination or distinction. And Plotinus's words rung true at that time to me. Intellect desires the one. So anything that you make, if you're knitting a sweater, if you're baking a cake, if you are writing a book, it is your intellect taking you towards a unity. A sweater is a unity. A sparrow building a nest is a unity. And so, you know, you're subconsciously, you are always creating or working towards reaching unity and oneness. When I was traveling through Egypt, which was his birthplace, and I needed to throw myself into that space, you see how Roman emperors who conquered Egypt became pharaohs. They discarded their Roman robes and they adopted pharaonic attire. And they even worshipped Egyptian gods. Of course, conflict came before, but as the dust of conflict settled, you had this sense of acceptance. The Nile, where Plotinus wrote some of his most meaningful verses, spoke to me. And this is where he really accelerates further in terms of intellectual thought, and he blames the eyesight. You know, we heard from the speaker before about how the eyes are to be blamed, if not. But he blames the eyesight, and he says your senses create differences. No doubt we should not speak of seeing, but we cannot help talking in dualities, seen and seer, instead of boldly the achievement of unity. This seeing we neither hold an object nor trace distinction. The man is changed, no longer himself, nor self-belonging. He is merged with the one. One with it, this is why the vision baffles telling. If we have seen something thus detached, we have failed of the one, which is to be known as only one with ourselves. He has become unity. And that's the beauty of water. You know, there are two elements that have come together, and they are the most astounding unity that bring life to all of us. I went to Delphi, which is this tiny little place in Greece, and I encountered this wall, which is known as the Wall of Oneness. And if you look at it closely, you have inscribed names of freed slaves as they were given freedom to run down the mountain and become one with society. While this is the Wall of Oneness, we also created the wall in Berlin, which divided people. And that's what we do as human beings. And his last stop, Plotinus' last stop, was Sicily, because he was so fed up with Roman politics and all the treason and treachery that went into bringing down Caesars, that he ran away to Sicily. When I followed his footsteps there, I saw this monument, but it wasn't there in Plotinus' times. It's the Palatine Chapel in Sicily, where Islamic architecture merges seamlessly in a cross to signify the glory of Christ. Frederick II brought in the finest Muslim craftsmen to make this dazzling ceiling of Islamic Muqarna-style stars. And all around them, they're adorning Christ. And I thought of Plotinus' verse, if they are distinguished by being the other, they will not be the good. When you are self-gathered and nothing can shatter that inner unity, you need a guide no longer, strain and see. This is the eye that sees the mighty beauty. Finally, when I was in Sicily, I had the most astonishing experience. Anyone from South Asia, and we all probably all are, you know when you see street cricket. And I saw these Bangladeshi boys playing street cricket in Syracuse. And quite instinctively, I was drawn to them. And I went up to them. They couldn't speak Hindi. They could speak fluent Italian, but very broken Hindi. And I started having a chat with them, and this boy, young Imad, is on the lamppost. He offered me the bat. His brother bowled to me. I was bowled on the first ball, or second ball, I think. And you know, who knows? These guys could very well become, you know, captains of a future Italian cricket team. That's unity for you. You also see this mighty beauty of unity when you do not other. And this is an astounding example of what happened in February 2021. We as humankind launched a spacecraft on Mars. The first time a planet named by the god of war had been conquered by love. Because Swati Mohan, an Indian origin scientist, Alan Chen from China originally, and I forget the gentleman's name, but he's obviously European. They came together, worked for NASA, and landed a spacecraft on Mars called Perseverance. What we do with it in the future is the free will of intellect. Thank you.
So thank you so much to all our speakers. Our speakers now have the privilege of a conversation amongst themselves, which you can eavesdrop on. I'm going to actually suggest that they might start by thinking whether there is necessary connection between a sense of oneness and an attitude and behaviour that is compassionate and that brings healing. Or can the two be quite separate, with a conviction of oneness being allied with what we could see as unethical behaviour, and for that matter, beautiful, loving, moral conduct that actually has no apparent connection with an exalted philosophy of either the oneness of God or the oneness of everything. So I'm going to throw that to them to just sort of start, and then there'll come a point where you, the audience, can put your questions. And I should have said earlier on, of course, that it's possible for you to get signed copies of the Jules book, which is available outside, if you wish to, after this afternoon's sessions. Okay, so I will keep quiet, I think, but I've sent you the question to start with, the connection between behaviour and belief.
Behavior? Yeah. So on behavior, you know, how are we living our lives over here? That's so very, very important. Guru Nanak in Japji Sahib, his morning prayer, on which the entire Guru Granth Sahib is based on that morning prayer of Guru Nanak. He starts off by asking a question. He says, Kiv sachiara hoye, kiv kure tutte pal. How can we become truthful and lift the veil of illusion, because we are living a virtual reality life, because we've forgotten the real purpose in life and are running after temporary material satisfactions. But then he answers his own question when he says, Hukam rajai chalna, Nanak likhya naal, live as per hukam, or the divine laws. But what is hukam? That is what I would like to know. You know, what all of us would like to know. Is hukam a pre-written destiny that we have been handed down and we have no role? Or are we puppets on a string? I like to believe that hukam is a framework under which the universe operates. So, you know, the planets revolve around the sun through that divine order, through that divine command. So the planets which don't revolve around the sun in that purpose, they are lost forever. If they deviate from their orbit, they're lost forever. So birds, bees, plants, animals, all are operating within this framework. Only we human beings have been given a certain amount of free will to create and change our destiny and become better human beings, wiser human beings through our actions, good or bad.
That's wonderful. I wonder what either the Buddha or Plotinus or Advait
Buddha first.
or Moin would
Good or
like
bad.
to say.
Yeah, there was this reminds me of a very interesting, especially when Energy, you said our place in the universe. There was There was huge criticism leveled against the Buddha when he had established a Sangha outside his father's own kingdom in Kapilavastu. So his father, King Shuddhodhan, who is now very elderly and he is looking for someone to take over his throne, but he comes to his own son and he says, son, every capable warrior and leader has virtually been poached by they are so drawn to you that they want nothing to do with the material world and the order that was present before you came along and just disrupted it. And this was a very pertinent question because in terms of duty as well, someone like Siddhartha had, if you look at it objectively, walked out on his wife and his newly born child. That is a fact. So this really does beg the question, how much can you take in context? How much do you take for the moment? What is your sense of right and wrong, your sense of belonging, your sense of place in the universe for what's right? Because as Siddhartha explained to his own father as well, he said that I have gone to this extent so that perhaps no one else will have to. And he did mark a change in his teachings after that when he said it is not necessary for you to sort of completely give up on the material world or completely give up on these things which you have hitherto perceived as necessary because now you perceive them as unnecessary luxuries. The role that he then assigned to himself was to find that middle path, and that's originally how it came about.
Thank you. Would you like to say anything in this discussion or to raise anything on the basis of what you've heard from the others in their presentations?
No, I'd just like to add that, and I'd like to stay with Plotinus, who is the hero of my book. He lays the blame solely at the doorstep of your thought and your intellect. And to Advait's point where, when you pull back, there is a sense of nothingness, which is the originator, which you could probably, say is nothingness or is everything. But this realm, according to Plotinus, this realm that you and I and all of us inhabit is the realm of intellect, and it's the realm of motion. And that is governed by free will. And that can unite for good, and it can unite for evil. And that is all. He just keeps it as simple as that. And I think that's the potential of that thought which kind of got me writing this book, because it's so simple. You can come together for good, you can come together for bad. It's, unity doesn't necessarily mean good. It can mean evil. I mean, it can become evil if the way you use it.
Thank you very much for that. I don't know, a huge question, which perhaps people from the floor will want to take up, but I'll share it now, is when we talk about oneness, are we all talking about the same thing? Because there are statements that God is one, but also we can say that reality is one. And in fact, Kaur in the Sikh tradition has been translated both ways. But one of those onenesses, God is one, sets up a dualism of God and creation, or good and bad. Are we actually talking about the same thing when we talk about oneness? So if anybody here would like to have a stab at that would be fine, and then I'll take some questions from the audience.
Let's ask from the audience.
Yeah, let's hear from the audience.
Here, let's hear from the audience.
Food for thought.
Has anybody got a question about anything that you've heard or anything that relates to the subject of today's presentations?
Do you think that hukam can be more than just duty? Do you think it could be something spiritual or something beyond that?
Do you think hukam?
Hukam, the word specific. You mentioned the word hukam.
Can hukam be more than just duty?
Do you think it can be more of to a command, something spiritual?
Yeah, hukam is a very wide term because we are not, like I said, we are not puppets on a string. We have got certain roles. For example, when we go out and do something wrong, there's a voice inside us which tells us that you're doing wrong, don't do it. And that is our conscience telling us, if we don't listen to that voice, that one day that voice will stop. And we then transgress, go down from being human beings to being worse than animals. So, you know, Guru Nanak said, Changyaiyan buraiyan vache dharm hazur, karmi apo apni ke nede ke dur. He says that in this game of life, we are all players and each move counts, like a chess player. So we are creating and changing our own destiny through our actions, good or bad. So what I like to say is that at that time, 500 years back, Guru Nanak used the Hindu terminology of Chitragupt. That is recording everything that we speak, we do, we act. And nowadays, we have to speak the same language, but in a different way to explain to the computer age. So what I like to say is that everything that we speak, are we thinking bad things or are we thinking good things? Are we saying bad things or good things? So everything is being recorded up here in our conscience, which is, I call it our aircraft's black box. And then it is uploaded instantly into God's iCloud. You know, God's iCloud has unlimited terabytes. We might have 1 million terabytes over here in the computer world, but that is unlimited terabytes. So we should be careful what we think, what we speak, and most importantly, how we act in our day-to-day life, because we are creating our own destiny from minute to minute. We can even change our previous destiny from our previous lifetime in this lifetime as well.
Thank you. Any question from the floor for either of the other speakers specifically? Yes?
So I had a question around, I'd love to hear the panel's view on how, thank you. I'd love to hear the panel's views on how within their thought systems they look at violence and aggression. And I'd love to maybe bring two instances specifically. One is the illustrious and long martial tradition within Sikhism, for example, which goes back hundreds of years. And the second one, probably the Tibetan situation, where a long-standing preference for non-violence has led to an existential risk to the belief system and the country itself. And I'd love to hear how the panel thinks about how you balance oneness and a feeling that we are all one with these realities in today's world.
Thank you. Well, with Buddhism in mind, would you like to start?
Yeah, it's very thank you for that question, by the way. But very interestingly, most martial arts actually originated because monks needed to train their muscles to withstand long hours of meditation. So it's very funny that there is this duality in their very birth. They were not meant as ways to exert violence, towards each other, or to fight, or to train yourself in any way. It was meant, the main aim was to be able to meditate and go deeper, because after a while, these monks who were meditating found that their own physicality was the limitation that they had to push the boundaries of. But to sort of sum up, there is a sense of duty, a sense of dharma, if you will, across all these religions, hukma as well. And how do you make a statement that, how do you feel like violence is bad or violence is good if everything is ultimately contextual? And I think through the process of looking inwards, you will be able to know for yourself whether that is good or bad or needed or unnecessary or something that you're just doing for whatever reason. So I guess that isn't something that can be defined or decreed in any way. It is, unfortunately, it is completely esoteric and open to interpretation, and your own interpretation as well.
Harinder, would you like to say something specifically about the martial tradition in Sikhi?
Yeah. Well, when Guru Nanak established the order of the Khalsa, or the pure Sikhs, there was a reason for that, of course. And first of all, he created Sant Sipahi. Sant means saints, and then soldiers. So the soldier, a Khalsa soldier, Khalsa means pure, purity. Don't confuse it with Khalistan or anything like that. Khalsa means a pure person, pure in thought, words, and deeds. So the Sant, the saint, virtue has to come first before you have the Sipahi. Because Guru Nanak, Guru Gobind Singh, everyone said, when all else fails, then only it is righteous to pick up the sword. And he gave us the kada, the round symbol which we hold in the hand, which is a sword arm. It is a circle of life as well, and it is a steel, circle of strength. So this is the Guru's handcuff. So when something happens and we draw the sword, we are reminded of the Guru's handcuff and reminded of his words, never to use it for an evil purpose, always to use it to protect others. And that's why Sikh Gurus have given their lives, not for their own faith, but for the faith, to protect the faith of the Hindus. And if the Muslims had been in that situation, they would have protected them as well.
Thank you so much. I think we have time for one more quick question. Yes. Sorry, gentlemen, 3 rows, 4 rows back.
I have a question for Advait. It could be personal. It might sound, but I can understand you spoke about the quest of the boy becoming Siddharth. You reflected upon that. And my question to you is very simple. You as a boy, of course, you look like a young boy even today. That's a different. But you. What is that trigger or triggers in your own life that made you get into this journey, or to understand Buddhism, or the quest of this boy or of Siddharth? Would you like to reflect? If you want to, it's a little personal, I know, but maybe.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. I feel like I was supposed to be happy with what I had at that point in time. I had a very nice job. I had a very supportive family. Well, they're still supportive, to be clear. I have a very supportive family, and I was comfortable, and I was supposed to be happy. At least that's what the script said, but I wasn't feeling that same level of satisfaction that I was meant to be feeling. And I thought, is this the script that I'm supposed to follow for the rest of my life? What is my sense of... I had to discover what my purpose was as a human being. Why am I here? If I'm here to follow another script, then where does this go? What is the end game? It stemmed from a bit of a quarter-life crisis. And also it was very funny. I went to college away from home. I was living in a place where I found where we were devoid of other socio-economic structures. And then I found that as soon as we went out into the world, we all fell back into the places that society had kind of dictated for us, be it in terms of jobs, and everyone had their own path to follow as well. I found it very strange that I was no longer connecting with other human beings the way I would at a very human level. And I felt like I was going quite far away from that. And I feel like, and honestly, I was at home one day and I just saw this book called Old Path, White Clouds lying around by Thich Nhat Hanh, who passed away a couple of years ago. And that sort of made me realize the questions that Siddharth had and why they're so pertinent and and they're the same questions that we, as an entire generation of people, perhaps still ponder over. And I don't know if, as I was talking to Eleanor just before the session, I don't know if we will ever reach these answers, but they're definitely worth asking and thinking about. So
that's a brilliant note to end on, because I think we've had our time.
Thank you very much to our speakers for such a stirring talk, and I hope you'll all have time to look at the book in the bookstall outside as you go past. There is tea for speakers and patrons, but we've got half an hour, and as I mentioned before, there are several cafes around if people want to just pop pop out and get something while I make my little presentations to our speakers. Thank